sting wasn't instant. It crept in like shame. Slow, sharp, impossible to ignore. I stood by the conference table, clicker in hand, my strategy locked and rehearsed after 3 brutal months of late nights and missed weekends. This was supposed to be my moment. But as the words left Greg's mouth, everything I'd built collapsed in silence. And somewhere deep beneath the humiliation, a colder truth began to settle. They didn't just dismiss me. They underestimated me. Smile and pour the coffee, Mia. We'll handle the strategy. The room exploded into polite, forced laughter. Laughter that wasn't even about the joke. It was about who was allowed to make one and who wasn't. About hierarchy, about comfort zones, about the permission to humiliate someone under the warm, dull light of banter. I stood there, frozen. I could feel my face flush, the heat blooming across my cheeks and down my neck. My stomach curled in on itself. Greg didn't even glance at me. He turned to the clients like I was a piece of stage furniture. Not a person. Not the strategist who had built the damn project from the ground up. Just the coffee girl. And I poured it. I fucking poured it. Because in that moment, I didn't know what else to do. My fingers worked on autopilot, gripping the sleek carafe, filling their ceramic mugs like it was 1956, and I was some secretary from a television show. No one said a word. Not a single person in the room looked uncomfortable, not enough to say anything anyway. Across the table, one of the client's assistants raised her phone and started recording. "For socials," she said with a grin. "Behind-the-scenes vibes. Our followers love the human side." Human side. My humiliation was content now. I wanted to disappear. I smiled, hollow and mechanical, and kept my eyes down, but something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not in an obvious way. It was the quiet rupture of a dam, the kind that doesn't flood the valley all at once, but shifts the soil and lets the water through inch by inch. When the meeting finally ended, Greg clapped me on the back like he was proud. "Great assist, Mia," he said, like I'd fetched Gatorade at halftime. The clients left pleased. They didn't see me. They saw Greg. And maybe that was the whole point. I rode the elevator down 27 floors without a word. The mirrored walls didn't flatter anyone, but they were honest. My reflections stared back at me, composed, calm, dead-eyed. I looked like I hadn't just been gutted in front of half the agency. I looked like someone who could take it. But I was already unraveling. At home, I didn't eat. I didn't shower. I didn't even change. I just sat on the edge of the bed, still in my blazer, replaying the clip someone had sent me via Slack, tagged LOL look who got promoted to barista. I watched it 5 times, 10, maybe 20. The frame was shaky, the audio tinny, but the moment was sharp. Greg's face, the clients laughing, my hesitation. And then, the worst part, my compliance. My hands as they moved toward the tray, the smile I plastered on like a shield made of tissue paper. I set my phone down and walked to the bathroom. The mirror there was smaller, less forgiving. I opened the drawer and pulled out the tube of red lipstick I hadn't worn in over a year. It was too bold for office days. Too confrontational, someone once said during a branding workshop. Red lips send a message, they warned. Good. I uncapped it and stared at myself in the dim bathroom light. I didn't apply it with care. I applied it like war paint, like declaration. This wasn't about vanity. This was about reclaiming something. "If they're giving me a stage," I whispered, "I'll make it mine." Because that moment, the one where everyone laughed and no one defended me, that wasn't the end of something. That was the beginning. They didn't know it yet, but they'd handed me a blueprint, a perfect, glittering path to their undoing. and I was going to follow it, step by step, with the same precision I had poured into their strategy decks. Except this time, I wasn't saving anyone's project. I was burning the whole hierarchy down. Noah didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. By the time I walked through his door that night, still wearing the same blazer, the look on my face told him enough. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and headed straight for the whiskey cabinet. Not to drink. I just needed something solid to hold. The bottle was cool and square in my palm. He sat cross-legged on the floor by the coffee table, laptop open, notes spread out like puzzle pieces. He was always like this, casual, unassuming, half invisible to most people in the office. A quiet strategist who watched more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was the kind of insight that made people go still. He wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. Noah's power came from precision. He waited until I sat down next to him before asking, "Greg again?" I nodded. "He buried your pitch?" I laughed, one short exhale. He didn't bury it. He made me pour coffee while they filmed it. Noah's eyes flicked up from his laptop. Just once. But it was enough. He didn't say what I knew he was thinking, that this wasn't new, that Greg had been stealing oxygen in every meeting since I joined. But something about today had gone too far. Greg hadn't just dismissed me. He'd dressed me up like a prop for performance. "I want to destroy him," I said plainly. Noah didn't flinch. "Good. Let's start with his pressure points." We worked silently for a few minutes. It was strange how natural it felt, dissecting a man like a broken circuit board, not with vengeance, but with process. We weren't planning sabotage. We were auditing failure. "Vanity," I said first. "He can't go 10 minutes without reminding someone who he knows, who he's dated, or how many views his last panel got." Noah nodded, typing. "So, public image is leverage. What else?" "FOMO. If he thinks he's being left out of a trend, conversation, or media mention, it eats him alive." "Fear of missing out," Noah murmured. "We can work with that. Keep going." "Chronic lateness. He's never on time, ever. If he says 2 p.m., he means 2:27 and blames traffic." "Dependency." "Absolutely. He doesn't know how to manage his own calendar. His assistant practically wipes his ass for him." Noah smirked. "So if the assistant stumbles, the whole machine stalls." "Exactly. He delegates everything until he can slap his name on it." We kept going. Not just traits, but patterns. Which client names Greg dropped the most? Which buzzwords he used when bluffing? Where he parked? What time he arrived? How long he stayed on stage when invited to speak? What kind of lighting he demanded for video calls? This wasn't stalking. This was reconnaissance. And then we flipped focus, from Greg to the company. I pulled out my own notes, the kind I'd kept hidden in drafts and buried folders, things you only write down when you know you'll need them later. "We've got 6-week PR cycles," I said. "They book media pushes on Tuesdays, prep on Mondays. Greg always volunteers for those shoots." "Recurring vulnerabilities," Noah noted. "Any gaps in protocol?" "Too many," I said. "Car routes don't verify pickup names. ID badges expire every 90 days but can be reprinted with a manager override. Greg's never once submitted his own badge form. He just forwards it to his assistant." "Soft points in the system," he said. "Friction points we can nudge." I nodded. If we time it right, we don't need to fake anything. Just apply pressure in the right places and let gravity do the rest. Noah looked at me then. Really looked at me. "You're not looking for a scandal," he said. "No, scandals rebound." "You're looking for failure by inertia." "Exactly," I said. "He sabotages himself." We just stop catching him when he falls. We built a map, a literal one. Timelines, dependencies, meetings that didn't need to happen but always did because Greg liked hearing his own voice. I marked the dates of upcoming events, industry galas, vendor walkthroughs, investor debriefs. "I'm not touching anything illegal," I said quietly. "Not even close." "You don't have to," Noah said. "The system protects people like Greg because they're loud, not because they're smart. You're not tearing it down. You're letting it run exactly as it was built, just without your unpaid corrections." That was the moment I knew he was on my side, not just as a colleague, as a witness. And that mattered, because if this was going to work, I needed more than revenge. I needed credibility. "Don't worry," I said, pulling my laptop closer. "I'm not looking to make a scene. I'm looking to make a shift." We kept working until the clock hit 2 a.m. When I finally stood to leave, Noah walked me to the door. "Mia," he said, just before I stepped into the hallway. "Yeah? You don't need to make noise to take up space." I didn't respond. But later that night, back in my apartment, I opened the same drawer with the red lipstick and placed my notebook beside it. Noah was wrong about one thing. I wasn't just going to take up space. I was going to own the damn floor. Revenge without proof is just noise. I learned that early in my career, watching others crash because they had rage, but no receipts. Greg was reckless, but not stupid. He'd built a web of plausible deniability around himself. Every email, every project file, every team effort was diluted until no one could prove who did what. That's what he counted on. Chaos as camouflage. But chaos can be documented if you know where to look. The first thing I did was start building an archive. I didn't announce it. I didn't even keep it on the company drive. I created an encrypted folder buried in the middle of my cloud backup under the name Q4 Resources. Inside it, I built subfolders with clinical precision: timestamps, drafts, email chains, meeting transcripts, even screenshots of Slack threads. If he'd spoken it, written it, or stolen it, I wanted a copy. My first find came from the project that had started this mess. I opened the version history on the main deck, the one Greg had polished before sending it to the clients. His edits weren't strategy. They were ego. He'd replaced insights with buzzwords, cut context for slogans, changed the layout to fit his signature style. It wasn't even subtle. He'd removed my name from the credit slide, added his photo to the opener, and marked it as final version. So I made 2 copies. One labeled Final, for Greg, and one labeled Original Recommendations, Ethics Review. The latter was clean, factual, airtight. The kind of version that would survive audits. The kind of version that said, here's what really happened. Then I went deeper. Calendar entries, client correspondence, the dull but dangerous details that live between meetings. I cross-referenced timestamps between his submissions and my email drafts. Most of the time, he'd sent material within minutes of me saving my edits, meaning he was watching my document activity, waiting to hit send first. I screenshotted every instance. I didn't need a lawyer yet. What I needed was pattern, and Greg's pattern was sloppy repetition. A week later, Jada from HR found me in the break room. She was older than most of the department, smart, composed, the kind of person who could smell trouble before it surfaced. "You've been quiet," she said, stirring her tea. "Too quiet for someone who just got humiliated in front of half the agency." I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I'm fine." "Fine doesn't build new folders in encrypted drives," she said softly. I looked up from my coffee. "You know, I don't have to know the details to recognize the look. Just be careful, Mia. Whatever you're doing, don't cross the line." "I won't," I said, And I meant it. I'm just putting the truth in the right order. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good. Because when the truth's ready, it speaks louder than outrage. That night, I tightened the locks on my system. Every file Greg had touched, every project he'd taken credit for, I restructured into timelines. Each entry got a note. Who authored what, who sent it, and who presented it. It was slow, surgical work. But that's how you dismantle men like Greg. You don't argue louder, you document quieter. Still, something unexpected began to shift inside me. The act of organizing evidence wasn't just protection, it was empowerment. Each proof I cataloged, each inconsistency I caught, peeled back another layer of fear. I stopped replaying the video of my humiliation every night. I stopped needing to justify it to myself. The facts were justification enough. By Friday, I had an archive so clean it could have been a case study. But evidence alone wouldn't end Greg. He could spin, charm, deny. What I needed next was leverage. Something that would pull the thread from inside his own image and make the whole thing unravel publicly, without me ever touching the fabric. Still, before anything else, I had to test the system. I sent Greg a revised draft of a client proposal with a deliberate error, small, harmless, hidden in a data point footnote. If he reviewed it, he'd catch it. If he copied it, he'd replicate it. Within 3 hours, he forwarded it to the executive team with his name at the top, the error intact. I screenshotted it, timestamped it, archived it. That was the first domino. Over the next 2 weeks, I refined the pattern. I adjusted margins in documents, reordered bullet points, embedded invisible markers into exported PDFs. Nothing illegal, nothing destructive, just traceable. When Greg copied, I could prove it. When he presented, I had versions that predated his. I wasn't sabotaging him. I was protecting the truth from erasure. Noah checked my progress one night over takeout noodles and a bottle of ginger beer. "You're turning into a forensic accountant of betrayal," he said with half a smile. "I'm turning into someone who doesn't get erased," I replied. He leaned back in his chair. "You realize this isn't just about him anymore, right? This is about the entire system that let him walk over people like you." "Then maybe," I said, "it's time the system tripped." The next morning, I printed the key pieces, the verifiable timestamps, the before and after decks, the email threads where he thanked me for supporting the project he'd presented as his own. I stored the printouts in a plain black binder and locked it in my filing drawer. Not out of fear, out of readiness. Greg still strutted through the office like nothing had changed. His grin still flashed in the hallway reflections. But now, when he smiled at me, I smiled back. Because what he didn't know was this. Every time he said my name, every time he used my work, every time he stole credit, I was already recording his confession. Greg's downfall wouldn't come from one mistake. That's not how men like him fall. They don't collapse in a single spectacular failure. They erode, quietly, from within. I didn't need to sabotage him. I just needed to make sure he was pulled in 2 directions with equal force and no exit. I called them the magnets. The first magnet, attention. Greg's drug of choice. And the most powerful lure I could offer him was recognition. Real, press-worthy, ego-feeding spotlight. Through the internal comms team, I pitched a concept that was practically designed to seduce him. "We've been invited to do a pre-gala spread," I told Lindsay, our PR coordinator. "Industry Futures wants to profile one of our execs. Thought of Greg. He's our loudest voice right now." It wasn't a lie. Greg was the loudest, just not the smartest. Lindsay was on board instantly. "He'll love that," she said, already scrolling through her calendar. Gala week's packed, though. Does he have a window? I smiled carefully. I checked his calendar. There's an opening Thursday afternoon, 2 hours before the main vendor walkthrough. Should work. She nodded. Perfect. We'll set up a quick shoot, too. Keep it tight. Maybe 90 minutes tops? Perfect, I said, and walked out of her office without looking back. That was the first magnet set. The second required more precision. Vendors. Greg hated dealing with them, but he loved name-dropping their partnerships when it suited him. Months ago, during a particularly grueling budgeting session, he'd promised Nathan from Telescope Industries that he'd personally attend their final venue check-in before the gala. VIP touch, he'd said, waving a hand. We're not just an agency, we're partners. He hadn't followed up since, but I had. I reached out to Nathan under the guise of coordinating logistics and gently reminded him that Greg had agreed to appear in person. He mentioned being eager to see the prototype staging, I wrote. Thursday's the last available window, correct? Nathan replied quickly, confirming the walkthrough was locked in. 2 p.m. sharp, he said. Greg told me himself. It's all set. 2 official events. 1 man, same hour. I forwarded the invite to Greg's assistant, phrased innocently, just checking that Greg's still confirmed for both. PR said he's all good for the shoot, and the vendors team is prepping final demos. I got a thumbs up emoji 5 minutes later. That's the thing with overconfident men. They assume the world will bend around them. They don't check for cracks until the floor gives out. Noah and I reviewed the magnets that night like we were checking weather conditions for a controlled fire. The PR interview is on record? He asked. Yep, scheduled, confirmed, and sent to the company calendar. And the vendor walkthrough? Documented. Greg's own assistant replied to both. He grinned. That's beautiful. He won't cancel either without losing face. Exactly. That's the trap. He'll try to do both. And fail both, Noah added. I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle in. It needs to look like he did it to himself. It will. The next day, Greg swaggered into the office with his usual bombast, laughing too loud and clapping backs like a game show host. When Lindsay told him about the magazine spread, his eyes lit up like a man who'd just been handed a mirror and a spotlight at the same time. Finally, he said, grinning. Told you our brand needed a face. They want to shoot you next to the new gala installation, she said. Kind of symbolic. Old guard meets new tech. He loved that. Symbolism was his love language. I watched from the corner of the conference room as he nodded vigorously, making plans for wardrobe and lighting. He didn't ask once who had arranged it. Meanwhile, Nathan from Telescope sent a confirmation message to Greg's phone, which he ignored. Thursday approached like a storm dressed in designer suits. That morning, I made sure both magnets were polished and gleaming. The vendor team was already setting up at the expo venue, finalizing light displays and branded panels. Nathan had emailed again, looking forward to showing Greg the upgrades. Across town, the PR team prepped lighting rigs and camera angles. Lindsay sent a calendar ping. Reminder, 2 p.m. shoot with Industry Futures. I'd crafted it to look routine, a quiet nudge. Nothing urgent, nothing strange. And Greg? Greg was in the office rehearsing lines. I caught him in the hallway, pacing and reciting to himself. At our agency, we don't chase trends. We define them. I could have laughed. Instead, I smiled and said, Big day? He grinned. Hell yeah, let's give them a show. He had no idea how true that would be. Later that afternoon, Noah texted me a single line. Both magnets are live. That was my cue. I closed my laptop, smoothed my blazer. applied the same red lipstick I'd worn the night Greg turned me into a viral joke. I looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Let a man walk toward two lights at once, and he'll burn in both. Greg always ran late, but he never missed the spotlight. That was his magic trick, stumbling through mediocrity, but somehow arriving just in time to grab the mic. So if I wanted the magnets to pull him apart, I needed more than scheduling chaos. I needed friction. Real, tangible, slow drip delays, not sabotage, not lies, just enough truth in the right places to stall him, legally, procedurally, silently. First friction point, his ID badge. Corporate security ran on a surprisingly fragile system. Every quarter, ID badges had to be updated, photo-verified, and tagged with new access permissions. Normally, Greg had his assistant handle all of it, and normally she just pulled the photo from his profile archive. But this time, I helped. I submitted his badge renewal form without attaching a photo. The system, following standard protocol, flagged it as verify on entry. No drama, no security breach. Just one extra step when he arrived at the gala. A standard identity check. One that would eat 10, maybe 15 minutes of his schedule if timed correctly. Next, his car route. Greg's default driver was Tony, who always took the express route across town. But express routes weren't reliable during gala week. Red carpets, media barricades, VIP check-ins. It was a mess. I submitted a transport recommendation to his assistant, completely above board, suggesting a longer alternate route to avoid gala gridlock and potential delays. It looked thoughtful, strategic even. In truth, the route added 17 minutes. Then came the meeting insertion. Greg never looked at his own calendar. That job fell to Marcy, his assistant. So when I added a 5-minute pre-run huddle to the shared event doc, just 20 minutes before showtime, no one questioned it. It was titled Gala Prep Key Talking Points, and it was scheduled in a glass conference room 2 floors from the venue stage. I even invited 3 junior strategists to make it look legitimate. Greg would be in the middle of a photo shoot or scrambling between appointments. He'd either skip the prep meeting entirely and miss the client briefing, or show up and throw off his timing even more. Either way, a crack in the schedule. No hacking, no false info, just gravity applied at the right angle. Noah called it precision dragging. "You're not stopping the machine," he said, reviewing the timelines with me late that night. "You're just adding sand to the gears." I nodded. Let him trip over his own confidence. We ran simulations, checked every trigger point, looked at Greg's historical behavior patterns, the time he missed the Q3 review because he spent 40 minutes filming a walk and talk reel, the way he always took extra time if he spotted a media booth. I mapped it all like an engineer debugging a collapsing bridge. It was beautiful. The final layer wasn't tech or timing, it was psychology. I knew Greg. I knew how he'd react when tension crept in. He wouldn't cancel anything. He'd double down, try to stretch himself thinner, appear at both the vendor walkthrough and the PR shoot. He'd think he could beat the clock. He always did. The week of the gala, I tightened the setup. The night before, I sent a friendly reminder email to his assistant. Just flagging tomorrow's final prep touch points, excited to support. No threat, no demand, just a gentle ping wrapped in enthusiasm. At 7:42 a.m., the morning of the event, I posted the final version of the gala strategy deck to the internal drive, clearly labeled, clearly dated. The deck I created, the one with the real metrics, the verified projections, the insights I had personally crafted, the one Greg hadn't seen. I also posted the Greg version to a separate private folder, time-stamped from 3 weeks earlier. the one he was still planning to use, full of fluff, buzzwords, and doctored optimism. Then I left both versions where the audit team could access them if anyone ever asked. Noah leaned over my shoulder as I clicked upload. 2 mirrors, he said. One tells the truth, one flatters the man. And the audience, I replied, is about to find out which one breaks first. I wore black to the event. Not symbolic, just strategic. Blend into the background. Let Greg see what he wants to see. My lipstick was red again, same shade as the day he turned me into a punchline. That was the day he handed me a stage. This time, I was ready to step into the light. I walked the perimeter of the ballroom during setup, nodding at the AV crew, checking the lighting angles on the main screen, confirming mic placement. No one questioned me. I looked like I belonged, because I did. At 1:45 p.m., Greg was still at the PR shoot, posing next to a branded light sculpture like it was a monument to his ego. A junior producer texted me a photo. He's loving this LOL, running a little behind. At 1:53 p.m., Nathan from Telescope messaged me, "Just checking, Greg on his way, we're ready for the walkthrough." At 1:57 p.m., I marked the pre-run huddle as started on the shared calendar. I watched the dominoes line up. Greg thought he could split himself between 3 obligations with 20 minutes to spare. He thought schedules bent to willpower, but time is an honest mirror. It doesn't lie. It shows up whether you're ready or not. At 2:01 p.m., the ballroom doors closed. At 2:03 p.m., the vendor team sent a second message. Still waiting on Greg. At 2:06 p.m., the security checkpoint at the venue flagged a badge for manual verification. And at 2:09 p.m., the master of ceremonies took the stage. No drama, no crash, just friction, slowly applied until momentum gave way to silence. And in that silence, I stood up. Greg's shoot ran late. Of course it did. The lighting wasn't quite right. The photographer wanted a few more takes. And Greg? He basked. He changed jackets 3 times. He requested a second round of B-roll footage, walking dramatically past the venue's mirrored wall, probably envisioning it as the header of his LinkedIn profile. The makeup assistant dabbed his forehead between every take. Time slipped away in soft, stupid increments. At 2:07 p.m., I watched the ballroom doors close behind the MC. The house lights dimmed. The logo animation rolled across the massive screen like a corporate sunrise. A quiet hum settled over the room. The crowd leaned in. Greg was nowhere. I stood in the second row, next to Lauren, the lead client and the one person in the room who had the power to double our account overnight. She glanced at the empty chair beside her, brow furrowing just slightly. From the other side of the room, I heard the event manager whisper into her mic. "Keynote reps not checked in. Security says ID badge needs visual verification. Still confirming." Greg, who had ignored 3 reminders to submit his photo. Greg, who had taken the long route to avoid traffic and instead hit a 10-minute detour caused by the pop-up press booth. Greg, who thought punctuality was optional as long as his smile landed. Lauren leaned toward me, her voice low. "Is Greg presenting?" I looked her square in the eyes. "He was scheduled, yes, but I have the latest deck with me, and I can step in to ensure your time is respected." A pause, then a small nod. The MC reached the final line of his intro. "Representing our partner agency, please welcome." He looked at the empty space, then at his clipboard. "Mia Thompson." My feet moved before hesitation could catch them. The ballroom was quiet in the way only big money can afford. Polished, composed, cameras already rolling. I took the stage, laptop in hand, clicker ready, heart oddly still. The spotlight hit. Red lips, black suit. steady spine. I didn't stammer. "Good afternoon," I began, voice clear. "Greg had a scheduling conflict. To keep us on time, I'll be walking you through the strategy he and I co-developed over the last quarter." There was no anger in my tone, no venom, only precision. Slide 1, the market challenge. Slide 2, audience insights. Slide 3, behavioral breakdowns and what they signal about post-pandemic trends. I spoke with the clarity of someone who had bled over these numbers, because I had. I gave them the real plan, the one Greg had discarded in favor of buzzwords. I showed them the projections based on verified data. I acknowledged risk. I mapped solutions. Lauren uncrossed her arms by slide 7. 2 people started taking notes. I could feel the room shifting, not toward me, but toward the work. And that was what mattered. When I reached the final slide, I paused. "Questions?" Lauren spoke first. "This risk index, who designed the weighting algorithm?" "I did," I said. 2 months ago, based on your Q2 performance metrics. I pulled external behavioral data to strengthen the model." She gave a small nod. "This is the strategy we've been asking for." Applause started before I even stepped off stage. Quiet at first, then building, not explosive, not dramatic, but full, earned. And that's when the ballroom doors burst open. Greg, breathless and pale, rushed in. His jacket was rumpled. His assistant trailed behind, holding his bag. A security guard tried to wave him back, but he pushed past. A ripple went through the crowd. He made it halfway to the stage before grabbing a mic from the AV tech. "Apologies," he said, voice bright and fake. "Running from one commitment to another. I'll just, add a few final thoughts to what Mia covered." He clicked his own version of the deck onto the screen. And that's when the cracks began to show. Slide 2, different numbers. Slide 4, data points that contradicted our quarterly findings. Slide 6, completely missing the legal compliance clause the client had flagged 2 weeks ago. An analyst raised her hand. "These don't match the metrics from last quarter." Greg blinked. "These are updated projections." Lauren spoke next. "Updated from what?" He floundered. "We refined the model after Mia's draft." And I stepped forward. "Let me clarify," I said gently. I didn't touch his mic. I didn't interrupt. I just lifted my voice a little, steady and precise. "The version I presented is the most recent, cross-verified against Q2 performance, and tagged with our internal compliance marker. It was uploaded to the shared drive this morning, timestamped." I didn't look at Greg. I didn't need to. The analyst opened her laptop, clicked, cross-referenced. "It checks out," she said. Greg stood frozen, holding a slide that had already begun to disappear. There was no screaming, no confrontation, just contrast, his panic, my precision, his shortcuts, my structure. The audience didn't gasp. They simply turned. Their attention left him like a tide rolling back from the shore. From the back of the room, Sean from the press team lowered his camera and whispered to someone. "That's the clip." That night, it would hit the company socials. Mia Thompson calmly delivers full strategy deck amid last-minute chaos. The comments would say things like, "She was ice. She was ready. She owned it." But in that moment, on that stage, all I felt was silence. The right kind. The kind that says, you didn't fight for the mic. You earned it. After the applause faded and the lights shifted back to a dim corporate glow, I stepped off the stage not with triumph, but with control. That's what stayed with me. Not victory, not relief, just the steady, grounded sense that I had done exactly what needed to be done. No stutter, no stalling, no saving anyone's face. Greg had wandered back into the shadows, his mic quietly reclaimed by the AV tech. His mouth opened once or twice like he wanted to say something, but nothing came. He hovered by the side wall like a discarded event banner, trying to make eye contact with people who were already walking past him. I stayed where I was, close to the client circle, answering questions calmly, clearly, not rushing, not apologizing. This was my arena now. Lauren stepped closer, her voice low. "You kept the room together." I met her eyes. They deserved clarity, and you delivered it. She gave a slow nod. "The last 3 presentations we've seen from your agency, none of them felt anchored. This one did." That wasn't a compliment. It was a verdict. I didn't smile. I just said, "Thank you." Behind her, Sean, the event media guy, was already reviewing his footage. I saw the moment he stopped scrubbing and replayed the part where I corrected Greg's figures without raising my voice. His eyebrows rose slightly. He knew he had gold, but it wasn't tabloid gold. It was transformation gold, the kind of moment that makes people rethink who leads and who follows. Someone from the strategy division walked past and offered a quiet fist bump. I returned it, but I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because now came the part that mattered most, the fallout. Backstage, I found a quiet corridor behind the press lounge. My hands weren't shaking, but my throat was tight, like my body was catching up to what just happened. I took a deep breath, reapplied my lipstick, not for vanity, for continuity. This was the same woman who had been told to smile and pour coffee, and now she'd just delivered the company's headline pitch. Noah appeared next to me like a shadow with purpose. "You broke him," he said softly. "I didn't touch him," I replied. He smiled. "That's what makes it perfect." "Press is already slicing the footage," I added. "Of course they are. You just walked off stage like an actual strategist. He walked in like a bloated cameo." I should have felt more. Pride, vengeance, adrenaline. But instead, what I felt was something colder, cleaner, like the kind of silence you get when the air clears after a storm. "I'm not done," I said. Noah nodded. "I know." He handed me a folder. Inside were printed slides, Greg's altered deck, the time-stamped version I'd uploaded that morning, and the email chain from his assistant confirming the schedule conflict. "HR will want these," he said. "They'll get them." And they would. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Before the whispers turned into stories Greg could twist, the truth had to land first. Back in the ballroom, the after-networking buzz had already begun. People mingled over champagne. PR managers took photos with speakers. But something had shifted. People weren't congratulating Greg. They weren't asking for quotes. They were looking for me. One of the junior analysts approached shyly. "Mia, that data map in your slide, could I get a copy? I want to use it as a model for a health sector pitch." "Of course," I said. "I'll send it by morning." Another came forward, then another. It wasn't a crowd, but it was movement, recognition. And that's when Lindsay, from PR, found me. "We're getting requests for a transcript," she said, phone in hand, "from at least 3 outlets. A transcript of the panel? Of your part specifically. You gave numbers. People trust numbers." I met her gaze. "Will the company support the release?" She hesitated. Then, "If it's your strategy, it should be your name." There it was. The shift. Greg didn't show his face again that night. Word spread that he had a transport issue. Classic. But the people who mattered had seen what they needed to see. I stayed until the last round of applause for the closing keynote. Didn't leave early, didn't linger for attention, just long enough to make it clear that I wasn't a stand-in. I was the strategist now. On the way out, I passed the same mirrored wall Greg had filmed himself in earlier that day. For a moment, I stopped and looked, not at the reflection, but at the space where he'd stood, posing, performing. Now it was empty. I didn't step into the spotlight. I walked through it. The moment Greg stumbled into the ballroom, the applause hadn't yet fully faded from my final slide. He came in like a storm that missed its timing, bluster without thunder, panic barely wrapped in posture. His shoes were scuffed from running. The collar of his shirt was damp, the PR team's makeup melting under his eyes like poorly set paint. Behind him, Marcy trailed breathless and beet red, still trying to smooth his arrival into something less disastrous. It didn't work. He scanned the room too fast, trying to recalibrate. His eyes landed on the stage, then on the front row, on Lauren, whose arms were now crossed and whose expression had settled into a kind of professional flatness that made you nervous, even if she smiled. Greg smiled anyway. He always did. "Apologies," he said, hurrying to the stage, grabbing the wireless mic the AV crew hadn't prepped for him. "Bit of a scheduling pinch. Mia and I were tag teaming this one. Appreciate everyone's flexibility." He clicked forward to a slide. His version, not mine. The design alone told on him. Overstuffed, glossy gradients, word salad. The kind of deck built for ego, not comprehension. "I'll just walk us through the top-line metrics," he continued, projecting calm, though his voice trembled on the ends of his sentences. "What we're seeing in Q4 is a pivot toward engagement-based segmentation. I call it social gravity." Lauren blinked. I didn't move from my seat. I didn't need to. On the second slide, a number flashed that contradicted the revenue metric I'd just presented, off by at least 20%. From the third row, one of the analysts raised a hand. "Sorry, that doesn't align with last quarter's report," Greg stammered. "We've since updated our modeling assumptions." "With whose data?" another asked. Greg hesitated. "Internal projection blends." And then I stood up. I didn't stride to the stage. I didn't push past him. I simply walked to the side monitor where the display split between slides and speaker notes. "Let me clarify," I said gently, nodding toward the panel. "The projections I shared earlier are based on our actual Q3 data, verified through both the client CRM and third-party consumer insight trackers." Greg opened his mouth. "I uploaded the full model this morning," I added. "It's on the shared drive under Final Strategy, Gala Deck, time-stamped and tagged with the audit trail." The analyst had her laptop open already. She clicked once, then again. "It's here," she confirmed. "Versions match what we were briefed on 2 weeks ago. The numbers Greg just showed don't." The room changed. It wasn't dramatic. No one gasped. No one screamed. But something subtle and unmistakable happened. Attention shifted. Not to Greg. Away from him, fully. And the press caught it. Sean from media was near the soundboard. His lens zoomed in, then focused on Greg. Shoulders stiff, jaw tight, mic drooping like a loose wire in his hand. Then the lens shifted. To me, standing calmly by the screen, nodding as the analyst cross-referenced slides. That was the shot. 2 people. One standing firm, the other unraveling. Later, that clip would run quietly through internal Slack channels and external LinkedIn posts with titles like "Preparation Meets Performance," when strategy isn't just a title. But right there, in real time, Greg tried to salvage what little stage he had left. "What Mia showed you was solid," he said, trying to chuckle. "Of course, we're aligned." Lauren spoke for the first time since he arrived. "Aligned?" she asked. "Because what I saw was 2 different sets of numbers, and one of them seems to exist only in your deck." Greg shifted. iterating. Real-time adjustments. With no context, she replied, cold and clear. No sources, no prior disclosure. He tried again. This was meant to be collaborative. Then I turned to face him fully and said the line I'd been holding since the first time he called me a support act. You told me I'd be handling logistics, so I did. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was authoritative. And that's when it happened. Sean raised his phone, not for video, for a live post. She didn't interrupt, she corrected. That's leadership. The ripple was small, but it would grow. By the time Greg exited the stage, abruptly, sweating, trailing excuses, no one stopped him. No one asked follow-up questions. He walked out the same way he came in, unprepared, unimpressive, unnoticed. I stayed behind to answer the real questions, clients, analysts, one from a partner agency who asked, point blank, "How long have you been doing Greg's job?" I didn't dodge. Too long. Noah appeared beside me later, arms folded, smirking. Well, that was surgical. I took a deep breath. It had to be. He looked toward the exit. Do you think he knows it's over? I shook my head. Not yet. But he will. Yes, I said. Because the people who used to cover for him just saw what happens when they stop. That night the footage spread. Internally, first. Then professionally. A woman at the podium. A man arriving late and wrong. No rage, no rant. Just data, truth, timing, and me. Steady, visible. Not dramatic, but undeniable. The video hit the executive Slack channel before sunrise, not the polished PR recap, not the staged photos from the light sculpture shoot Greg never finished. No, this one was raw, clipped directly from the AV stream and uploaded without credits. The file name read simply stageconf call final.mp4. It opened with me stepping to the mic, delivering clear, clean strategy. Cut to Greg stumbling into the ballroom mid-applause. Then a hard cut to the moment he tried to explain his off-book metrics, followed by the analyst's correction, and finally my line. You told me I'd be handling logistics, so I did. That last part wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, and it spread like controlled fire. By noon, Greg was summoned, not to a meeting, not to a check-in, to an executive review panel. That's what they called it when HR, legal, and 2 board liaisons sat across from you in a soundproof glass room and offered you water not out of kindness, but protocol. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. I'd already delivered everything they'd require. The folder I'd handed Jada, HR's sharpest blade, contained time-stamped decks, both original and edited email threads, showing Greg forwarding my work without attribution, project history logs confirming edit sequences, Slack messages where Greg belittled contributors while prepping for pitches. Every claim came with proof. Not speculation, not emotion. Just cold, meticulous evidence. Jada called me at 3:17 p.m. You'll want to check your inbox. I did. There it was. Subject, representation shift, strategic accounts body. Effective immediately, Gregory Watts will no longer serve as the external representative for strategic accounts. All upcoming client-facing materials, events, and planning sessions will be transitioned to Mia Thompson. We thank Greg for his contributions and look forward to elevating our partnerships under Mia's leadership. Short, clean, no fluff, no mention of demotion. But internally, we all knew what no longer serve as external representative meant. It was exile with benefits. The corporate version of being banished to a desk near the fire exit. Still on payroll, still in the org chart, but invisible. By 4:00, Greg's public calendar was scrubbed. By 4:30, his name was removed from the gala debrief memo. By 5, his assistant Marcy had been reassigned at her request. The collapse wasn't explosive, it was procedural, which made it worse. Greg tried to spin it, of course. Told some people he was moving into an advisory capacity, that he'd chosen to shift into mentorship mode, that the stress of being the face of strategy had been unsustainable. He even posted a photo of himself reflecting in front of a whiteboard with a caption about evolving your role to serve the bigger picture. But no one bought it, because alongside his post, mine was circulating too, though I never shared it. The company did. They clipped a 90-second segment from the gala. Just me, presenting, walking through the deck with clear voice and stronger data. It was posted on our agency's official channel with a caption that simply read, "The future of strategy starts with clarity." That was it. No need to drag him. No need to mention what had gone wrong. The contrast had already told the story. Jada found me that evening by the elevator, holding a small envelope. Not HR branded, just plain white. She handed it to me without ceremony. "Board signed it today," she said. Inside was a formal letter. "Mia Thompson is hereby appointed Director of Strategic Accounts, effective immediately. This promotion reflects her outstanding leadership, integrity, and vision." I didn't cry, but I stood there, holding the envelope, remembering the moment Greg had turned me into a laughingstock in front of the clients. The coffee, the comment, the filmed humiliation. And now, just months later, the same platform was mine. Jada smiled, eyes tired but warm. "You didn't just win, Mia. You proved the system wrong." I asked her something then, quietly. "Did anyone defend me that day?" She tilted her head. "No one openly, but they're apologizing now. Every one of them. Some to me, some to leadership, most to themselves." That was enough. That night, Noah and I sat on his fire escape with takeout. We didn't toast. We didn't plot. We just watched the city hum beneath us. "I don't feel triumphant," I told him. "Because you didn't just beat him," he replied. "You replaced him." I thought of Greg, wherever he was, probably rage scrolling through social feeds, still convinced someone had sabotaged him, but no one had. He'd sabotaged himself. I had just stopped cleaning up after him. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. No elevator music, no phone in hand. Just the soft hum of ascent and the faint glow of the city bleeding through the glass walls. 47 floors up, the world started to look less like a skyline and more like a blueprint. Clean lines, defined systems, structures that seemed unshakable, until you stepped inside them and realized most of them held together with habit, not merit. I'd never ridden to this floor before, not for a meeting, not for a pitch. This was executive air, senior access only, reserved for key decision makers, as if strategy had always belonged to a secret level above the rest of us. Now my badge opened it. The door slid open with a soft click. The office was quiet, sparsely lit, and somehow both minimalist and intimidating. The assistant greeted me with a small nod and gestured to the inner room. "He's expecting you." The CEO? Not because I'd asked, because he had. I stepped inside, every part of me composed. Black dress, red lipstick, heels that clicked like a metronome on the polished wood floor. The same woman they'd once asked to smile and pour the coffee. Now, I stood across from the man who ran the entire agency. He didn't rise, just looked up from his tablet and smiled, not patronizing, but measured. "Ms. Thompson," he said, "take a seat." I did. He set the tablet aside. I watched the footage 3 times. I waited. You didn't just hold the room," he continued. "You reset the tone of the entire presentation. No scrambling, no showboating, just clarity." "I figured they deserved it," I said. He nodded. "They did. We all did." He leaned back in his chair. "I won't ask how you pulled it off," he said, "but I will say this. That level of poise under pressure, paired with actual strategy, it's rare. That's not just damage control. That's leadership." Silence stretched between us. Then he added, "You handled yourself with grace." It wasn't the compliment that stayed with me. It was the restraint. The knowledge that even now, he didn't ask what Greg had done. He didn't ask how many times I'd been erased, overlooked, reshaped for comfort. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he already did. When I left his office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Back downstairs, the office floor was mostly empty. Late Friday. People had already slipped out for happy hour or caught early trains. I passed the empty boardroom where it all began, the same one where Greg had pointed to me and laughed. "Smile and pour the coffee, Mia. We'll handle the strategy." Those words no longer lived in my skin like acid. Now they felt like notes from a performance long past, someone else's monologue. I opened the door, stepped inside, and turned on the light. I walked over to the head of the table. Not Greg's seat, my seat now. I stood behind it for a long moment, hand resting on the backrest, looking out at the rows of chairs, the polished table, the hollow echo of silence waiting to be filled. Then I walked to the mirror in the adjacent hallway, the same one I'd stared into months ago when humiliation still clung to me like a stain. The woman looking back wasn't smiling. She didn't need to. Red lips, calm eyes, shoulders back, not polished for performance, prepared for permanence. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification. New comment on agency post. I opened it. It was the clip again. Me at the podium, mid-sentence, mid-delivery, owning space that was never supposed to be mine. The comment read, "Mia didn't take the spotlight. She turned on the lights." I didn't respond. I didn't repost. Instead, I closed the app and tucked the phone away. Outside, the city glowed, not in celebration, but in movement. Taxis, offices, meetings still happening across the glass towers. Somewhere, people like Greg were still getting away with it. Somewhere, others like me were still pouring coffee they should have been presenting over. And to them, I say this: they won't give you the mic, so build your own stage. Don't beg for permission. Document everything. Refuse to shrink. And when the moment comes, don't shout. Just speak. Speak like the room is already yours. Because it is. I turned from the mirror. Elevator doors opened behind me, casting a soft reflection across the marble. I stepped in. The doors closed, and for the first time in my career, I wasn't heading down. I was headed up.